There we go. So we're starting the recording. And I'll just get right to it because we're short on time today. So I'm very happy to introduce as our first speaker, we have the new Mayor of Sekondi-Takoradi, Honorable Frederick Faustinus Fedu. And we're very happy to have him as a leader and supporter of this work in Sekondi-Takoradi, also throughout Ghana for one of our COMSA signatory cities who have taken a lot of action in the past couple of years on climate change. And I'm very happy to introduce him today to give some opening remarks. So I'll pass the floor over to you, Mayor Fedu. Is it working? I'm just asking to mute. Mayor, can you hear us?
I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. You're on. Please go ahead.
So I say I am taking this singular opportunity to welcome our partners and guests to this very crucial meeting. We are indeed elated and enormously grateful for this opportunity to address the nagging challenges of climate change in our metropolis here. Now, the twin city of Sekondi-Takoradi, ladies and gentlemen, which also serves as the regional capital of the western region of Ghana, is one of the fastest growing cities in West Africa. Hence, increasingly becoming vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, especially urban flooding. Our city's rapid and sometimes unplanned urbanization has reduced natural green spaces and wetlands, exposing communities to serious flood risk. In fact, over 1/3 of our land is now classified as highly or very highly flood prone. Now, according to recent studies, 12% of our land is classified as very highly flood prone, and another 24% as highly flood prone. This is not solely mere statistics, but also daily realities for neighborhoods like the Sekondi market area, a suburb called Bakado, where floods repeatedly damage properties, disrupt livelihoods, and limit access to essential services. Worrying, the most affected are our vulnerable groups, particularly women, youth, informal workers, and farmers, who have the least capacity to resist these climate stresses and recover. Now, recognizing these challenges, the Sekondi-Takoradi Metropolitan Assembly partnered with IISD to conduct a detailed economic assessment of our flood risk and adaptation options. The study, which is titled A Hybrid Infrastructure for Urban Flood Risk and Climate-Related Hazard Management in Sekondi-Takoradi, Ghana, has been successfully completed. The findings are clear. A hybrid approach combining engineered infrastructure with nature-based solutions is not only environmentally sound, but economically wise. This strategy could save the city hundreds of millions of dollars in avoided damages and maintenance costs over the next 26 years, while creating jobs, enhancing public health, and improving land values. Distinguished partners, this effort aligns closely with our Sustainable Energy Access and Climate Action Plan, which is aimed at ensuring that climate adaptation, flood management, and sustainable energy access are integrated into our city's development. We have the evidence, the partnership, and a practical, replicable model. What we now need is sustained commitment and investment to make Sekondi-Takoradi a model urban climate resilience for West Africa. I believe that together we must build cities that are resilient, inclusive, and green for today's families and tomorrow's generations. I want to thank our partners, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa, and the FCDO Green Cities, Infrastructure and Energy Program. Their commitment to building resilience in Sekondi-Takoradi. I am grateful for your kind attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We're giving you a virtual applause and an in-person applause in the room, I see. Thank you. Thank you so much for your remarks. Yes. And now that we have more people who have joined, thank you all for joining us. And I want to ask if you would like to introduce yourselves in the chat so we know who's in the room, that would be great. Please feel free to take the time to do so. And I'm just going to next introduce our next speaker. So to set the context a bit, we would like to ask Planner Alhaji Abu to give us a bit of the context of what's happening in STMA. Why was this project so important? Why did we decide to work on this together? And who better to give us this background and context than the development planner of STMA? So please, the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, should I make a presentation or I can just read?
Oh, you can just speak, yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor. Good afternoon, team from the NBS site. We are very grateful to have you here today again. Like the mayor said, Sekondi-Takoradi is one of the major cities in Ghana that is actually affected by climate change because of the influx of oil, one, two, the urbanization. Hello? Yeah, because of influx of the people into the metropolis for businesses as an attraction by the oil and gas. And then we also have the issue of high population due to vehicles and other things. So there's congestion in the city. And the other issue is that because of this congestion, there's so much development within the metropolis that is difficult to coordinate. And that is creating more problems in terms of construction of effective drains that can address our flooding problems. As a result, Sekondi has flood as one of the key climate change issues or hazards that we have to deal with within the metropolis, particularly within specific areas. And one of the specific areas is the Bakado and the Sekondi areas where this project is benefit. Now, what is happening is that when we identify these things, we needed to look for opportunity to help address them as city authorities. And hence, we have to contact through the COMSA and team, we were able to get in touch with the IISD team. And then we put together the proposal. And so our intention was for this analysis to help us come up with key interventions that will help us address in a sustainable manner the climate hazards, particularly the flooding within our metropolis. And so we are using this as a pilot. So we are going to use, we propose that we use what we call hybrid nature-based solutions to address the problem. The essence is that as we do the infrastructure using the nature-based solutions, we want to ensure that there's also the issue of sustainable land use and management. And so we had to integrate the two together and make it a hybrid project. And so for us in Sekondi-Takoradi, we are implementing the hybrid nature-based solutions infrastructure project. And so by doing this, if we are successful with your support, we'll be able to address the issue of flooding in the Sekondi market area and then the Bakano and its environs. Now, what we intend to do is we have developed a vision that will help us achieve this. And we are saying that by 2050, Sekondi-Takoradi Metropolis would be a climate resilient city where sustainable policies will be integrated into our planning processes, and then we'll implement safeguard measures that will protect our citizens against climate change, particularly climate hazards like the flooding. And then, you know, we also have high tidal wave that is also contributing to this flooding problem in the areas that we are targeting, especially Sekondi market area. And so that is our vision. And we want to undertake as part of this certain key activities. One was to look at what kind of measures we can implement in terms of laws to enforce building codes that will address the problem. And then we are also looking at the inclusion of the citizens into the process of implementing the nature-based solutions that will help address the flooding problem in a sustainable way. And so we came out with these objectives, and fortunately we had the support, and now the report is here with us. So we want to use this opportunity to thank you, especially COMSA and then the IISD team for this opportunity. And we only assure you that by the grace of God, we will implement this together with you again to the glory of God and for the benefit of our people. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Planner Alhaji Abu. Well done. And I think it's very nice to hear the vision of the city. And we already know you're a very ambitious city, but it's also very necessary because you're dealing with the challenges of climate change right now and already facing the impact. So we'll already congratulate you for the work that you've done and the initiative you've taken as a team and from the political leadership as well. So thank you very much. And I'll ask all those who have recently joined online to just make sure you're muted if you're not speaking. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, but also feel free to ask any questions in the chat and we'll come to them later. So I'd just like to introduce our next speaker, who will introduce and present on the content of the report that was released today. So we have Natalia Mino Giraldo. She's the systems modeler from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, or IISD, as we've been saying. And I'll pass the floor to her to give us some of the highlights coming out of the work that was done and the report. Go ahead, Natalia.
Thank you, Cher, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this conversation. I will be sharing the screen shortly. There we go. Let me know, Cher, if you can see the presentation. All good?
Yeah. Great.
Great, thank you. Okay, so with these slides, we aim to explain a little bit what you can see in the report that is published. We also share an email with the link, and we will be pasting also the link in the chat so you have a quick access to it. Thank you. Well, as it was already mentioned, but good to provide the context that we use for the assessment. We have a city that has faced different challenges over the past decades, increasing urban area, rapid urbanization, together with climate change related challenges, specifically flooding. It's one of the main issues of the city. The flooding issue has been creating challenges to critical infrastructure, private property, livelihoods, more vulnerable populations, and so on. With the rapid urbanization that results in degradation of forest and different ecosystems, these challenges are even more and more. The solution that was proposed is a gray and green combination of infrastructure. In terms of the nature-based infrastructure, we have the restoration of wetlands and green spaces, 1.97 hectares of wetland, 10.1 hectares of green spaces, together with the reconditioning of 3.13 kilometers of drainage systems that will cover both Sekondi Market and Bacado areas. The goal assessments, the report assessments were specifically to first quantify the costs and benefits of this hybrid infrastructure for flood mitigation, assess the environmental, social, and economic impacts of this hybrid infrastructure, and measure the cost effectiveness of the project. For this, we have a methodology called SAVI that we apply for the different assessments that we do, that is based in simulation with systems thinking and systems dynamics, together with spatial modeling and project finance modeling. For this case of this assessment, we use mostly systems thinking, and then we did the valuation where we developed an economic valuation of social, environmental, and economic externalities and risks that were particular for this case. As one of the other characteristics is that the assessments are customized to reflect the local conditions and needs. And it's also a process where we co-create with different stakeholders this approach, specifically in the initial phases where we develop the causal loop diagram that allows us to identify unique risks and unique characteristics of the area. So first, we develop the qualitative analysis, the systems map, where we try to find the relationships, the interrelationships among social, environmental, and economic variables. It is where we included a great group of stakeholders and developed that initial conceptual framework that will help us in the quantitative analysis, where with location-specific data, spatial related analysis, climate data and forecasts, and literature review, we proceed with the modeling work that in this case was made in Excel, an Excel-based model that is also easy to use and more like layout friendly for our project partners, where we develop the integrated cost-benefit analysis by assigning economic values to social, environmental, and economic variables to make it more comparable among them. So quick overview, we developed the causal loop diagram, spatial analysis, which in this case was not quantified, but we use climate scenarios that I'm going to explain soon. We use an spreadsheet model to calculate the costs, added benefits, avoided costs, and a time-based analysis that allows us to calculate the benefits every year, but also in a cumulative way. This is the causal loop diagram, which we cannot dive into detail right now, but you can find more details in the report. This causal loop diagram was created with a group of people that provided different points of view of the problem. This allowed us to generate a common understanding of the system and the problems and tell the story of the problem of why flood risk has been increasing more and more and more, for instance. This is the basis for the second part of the analysis, the quantitative part, and the first step for identifying the indicators that are going to be measured finally in the cost-benefit analysis. What are those indicators? So first, we start with the capital cost and the operational and maintaining cost of the implementation options. In this case, both the gray infrastructure and the nature-based infrastructure costs. We also quantify avoided costs such as flood damages, air pollution, and avoided infrastructure maintenance. And for the other benefits, we have job creation from construction and operation and maintenance, increased carbon sequestration, and increased land valuation. We have two scenarios. First scenario is a baseline scenario where no interventions are envisaged, so the flood impacts keep the historical trend. A second scenario where we have the implementation of the hybrid scenario with the restoration of wetlands and mangroves, green spaces, urban gardens, the drain improvement, and also awareness campaigns for citizens towards nature-based infrastructure, which is a key component for the project to function in the right way. For the hybrid scenario, we have three variations of the scenarios. As we had uncertainty on the level of flood valuation, we have a scenario that has low valuation, which means that we assign a low value of economic damages. Then we have a high one and the average one, which is the average between two. And here we can see a bit more detail. So for instance, the low one assumes cost per flood event of almost 3 million USD, the high one almost 13 million USD, and the average one around 8 million USD. So based on those costs and to account for the uncertainty on those costs, we will find the scenarios. On top of that, on top of those scenarios, we also have the climate scenarios, the shared socioeconomic pathways, for which we have 5 scenarios, but we use in the model only 3, the SSP1, the SSP3, and the SSP5. Because they represent the low emissions pathway, in this case, the SSP1, a low emissions pathway that shows a more optimistic outcome in terms of climate change. Then we have the SSP5, that is a scenario highly reliable in fossil fuels and more pessimistic in terms of climate change. And then a scenario in between the two, middle high emissions pathway scenario, the SSP3. Here, some examples of the type of data that we used in the model. In this case, we have, for instance, the average monthly temperature in Sekondi-Takoradi, which we can see how in the SSP1 scenario, well, it increases up to some point and then decreases a little bit, showing not a very high decrease compared to the other 2 scenarios, then following more historical trends. For the SSP3 and the SSP5, which are scenarios where there is higher reliance on fossil fuels and then higher emissions, we see how the average monthly temperature in the area is increasing. A bit more for the SSP5 scenario in the long term. And we also use data on precipitation, which we convert to an index called the extreme wet percentile. with this index, which is directly used in the model, we can measure the impact of these extreme wet events. In this case, we applied it to the flood risk value, and I'm going to show soon what are the differences there. But what we can see here in this graph is that we have it until 2100, but until 2000 and around 50, we can see that the SSP1 scenario has a tendency to decrease extreme events with time, while for the SSP3 and the SSP5 scenarios, if we see these dotted lines, which are the trends, they tend to increase over time. So we see the differences based on these climate change projections. Great. Now let's get to the numbers and the outcomes of this assessment. In this case, this is being modeled with the SSP3 scenario, which is the middle one, for the low, high, and average flood valuation scenarios. The values are discounted at a 3.5% rate, and the values are in USD million. So what we can see here, first, we see the total costs that for all scenarios are the same CapEx and OPEX as the interventions are the same. The only changes in the interventions are the avoided cost, and we will get to that. In terms of the added benefits, we also find the same results across all scenarios in job creation, carbon storage, and land valuation increase. And then in terms of the avoided cost, is where we will find the differences. You can see that, for instance, in the high flood valuation scenario, we have avoided costs of around 700 million USD, while for the low one, it's around 160, and for the average one is around 414. So we can see the differences based on that sensitivity analysis that was applied there. This is reflected in these final outcomes, the net benefits, the benefit to cost ratio, and the internal rate of return. For the net benefits, which basically represent the benefits minus the costs, we find that the net benefits are positive, which already tells us that the benefits and avoided costs are higher than the implementation cost of the project. And it is lower for the low valuation scenario and higher for the high valuation scenario, which means that the more risk or the more the larger the flood events or the more expensive, the more benefits we can see from mitigation. So it's important to consider that. In terms of the benefit to cost ratio, which is the ratio between the benefits and avoided costs and the costs, as long as this benefit to cost ratio is higher than 1, it means that we already have benefits, some benefits, but we can see that it's way higher than 1. For the low valuation scenario is 3.26, which means that for each dollar that we invest in this hybrid infrastructure, considering a low flood valuation, so the lowest cost of the damage possible, we will have a 3.26 USD of return. So we can see how even from the low valuation scenario, we already see great benefits. And then for the internal rate of return, we have internal rates of return that are higher than the discount rate, so higher than 3.5, which indicates that we have positive benefits and that the financial outcome will look good. Then we have this other table, which has the same assumptions as in the previous scenario, except that here we take only the average one, and what we change is the climate scenarios. So we have the SSP3 already modeled in the previous table, and here we add the SSP1 and the SSP5. And what we can see here is that the SSP3 scenario although being a medium-high emissions pathway scenario is the one that has the higher benefits, the one that avoids more damage, because in this case, this scenario has more extreme events than the other two extreme flood events. So the precipitation in this scenario is at a higher risk, and that's why we see a higher value for the scenarios. Then it is followed by the SSP1 scenario, which is the second one with the higher risk of flood, and then with the SSP5, the third one. For all of them, we can see already great benefits and great returns. And this is to show how the worse the situation it can be, the more valuable it becomes to invest in hybrid infrastructure in Sekondi-Takoradi. So how the scenarios can compare. In terms of the benefit to cost ratio, we can see how the higher the valuation of the flood event, the higher benefit to cost ratio, and the lower value of floods, the lower benefit to cost ratio, similar as it already shows in the other tables. And then for the SSPs, the values are actually similar. So the scenarios among them represent a similar mitigation result. But if we have the SSP3, in this case, it is more valuable even because the precipitation patterns there and the flood events are more extreme in this case. So let's summarize the results. In terms of economic viability, we see that all scenarios are strongly economically viable with benefits to cost ratio beyond 1, and discount an internal rate of return, that are surpassing the discount rate. So it already indicates economic viability in terms of which scenario is best economically is the hybrid scenario with a high flow valuation, because it shows the highest potential of mitigation of flood risk, basically with 13.53 USD dollars in return per USD invested, and with net benefits of around 700 million USD. While the scenario with the lowest performance, but still very good, is the scenario with the low valuation of flood events. We see among the different benefits and avoided costs that the flood risk is the one that drives the economic benefits. In this case, is the one that has the highest share among the externalities that were evaluated. Additional to that, an important cost as well is the cost of infrastructure maintenance that is avoided due to the flood events. So these results emphasize the critical importance of flood management and how this hybrid infrastructure can really help with this. But we also see environmental benefits, carbon sequestration that comes from the wetland and mangrove restoration, urban gardens, and green areas in the urban context. So 1.38 million USD across all scenarios in environmental performance. So what are the final conclusions and recommendations? First is that the hybrid infrastructure for flood resilience, it's an effective way to mitigate urban flood, that it integrates great solutions with nature-based infrastructure and manage to not only mitigate flood, but brings other type of benefits, environmental and social benefits. That the project can bring economic and social gains in terms of jobs, job creation, and also increasing the property value of around 400 houses in the areas and more than 20 shops. We also can conclude that it is important to integrate urban planning to this type of infrastructure in policy and urban planning, as it is proven to be a great solution for flood type issues. So it is essential to include it and also to engage with the community to ensure that the project is sustainable and that the community is engaged with the project and can support the interventions and maximize the impact. And that's all from my side. Thank you. I will stop sharing the screen and pass it on to She.
Thanks very much, Natalia. Really interesting results from the study. And I know we have many participants on here from other cities in Ghana and also some cities in Kenya joining us. I'm sure the city staff can agree that floods are expensive and damaged infrastructure is also very expensive. But it's really great to have this presented in such a visible way, not only for STMA to use this for their own planning and purposes, but also to use with for engaging potential funders for the project as well. So thanks very much. I'm very happy to say we have a good news follow-up to this work that's already been done. And I'm very happy to have the Green Cities and Infrastructure and Energy Program to be presenting on their next steps. They were actually also responsible for the initial study, the pre-feasibility study that identified these two priority areas that were addressed in the IISD assessment. And it's great news that they're also taking this work forward to the next phase. So I will just introduce, I'm sharing my screen, our next speaker, who is Shelto Baraje. Hope I said that right. The Urban Portfolio Manager for the Green Cities Infrastructure and Energy Program in Ghana, which is funded by FCDO. So Shelto, please, over to you. Shelto, are you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah. So
please go ahead.
Can I share my screen now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. A minute.
Sure, and while we're waiting, anyone, if you have any questions already for Natalia or for the team from STMA, please feel free to add them in the chat now, and we'll get to them when we get to the question and answer period.
Okay.
We can see your screen, Chato. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Just a minute. Okay. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for the opportunity share for Green Cities and Infrastructure Program. And we have been collaborating together to see improvement, to see the climate resilience of STMA. And then we are so grateful for the partnership and an invitation today to do this presentation to the wider stakeholders. On my screen, you see STMA flood and then mobility improvement feasibility study, and then climate multi-hazard maps development. So within STMA, the Green Cities and Infrastructure Program, supported by the British High Commission through the FCDO, that is Foreign Commonwealth Development Office of the British High Commission, formerly known as DFID, is funding this intervention. Okay, so the outline for my presentation is we'll look at overview of GSIP, then we now then deep dive into the specific interventions in STMA, which looks at the STMA flood and mobility improvement feasibility study, and then the hazard maps, which we are also developing for STMA. So as you can see, the Green Cities and Infrastructure Program is helping the Ghana government to make informed, evidence-based decisions when it comes to climate resilient planning. And not only that, and to also support Ghana government to build its capacity to attract investment for climate resilience. And then as part of that, the program has 3 interventions or 3 pillars. We have 3 broad pillars upon which the project is founded on. So as you can see, pillar one is looking at scaling and securing climate financing. Like I said, we are looking at building capacity of government so that they're able to attract funding for green climate, which is which is something that is currently lacking in the country. To do this, we are working with the Ministry of Finance to establish a climate financing unit that would coordinate the effort across country so that Ghana government can attract financing for climate investments across the country. The pillar 2 is looking at scaling renewable energy. As we know now, the energy mix is 70% thermal, and then 30% hydro. And then this is not sustainable. So as part of the intervention in improving resilience and then ensuring green growth, the program is also helping working with the Ministry of Energy to look at how we increase the renewable content of the energy production in Ghana. Then the 3rd pillar looks at the supporting climate resilient urban development. And this is the urban intervention that is looking at climate resilience of our cities in Ghana, and currently working with GIZ in STMA together with STMA and Ghana government. So with the STMA flood and then mobility improvement program, I'll proceed to this, what we have done so far. So we started with the diagnostics, and the diagnostics, this was completed in September 2024, which was to identify all the flood hotspots within Sekondi-Takoradi beyond the Bakado and then the 2 we've been discussing so far, because we needed to look at the holistic flooding issues within Sekondi-Takoradi and then come together with STMA and then the Ministry of Water Resources, Works and Housing to agree on how best we can mitigate and then help STMA improve its flood resilience. So as you can see on this screen, we have about 56 hotspots that have been identified, including the 2 we've been discussing so far. And the specific locations are all earmarked, and these were discussed, and we worked on this together with STMA, the Metropolitan Assembly, and it got validated by them. After we have identified all these hotspots, then we also look at the flood hazard modeling. So the flood hazard modeling was to look at how the nature of flooding within STMA based on the hotspot that we did. And as you can see from the picture here is showing you the areas within Sekondi-Takoradi that are very much likely to be flooded, and then the extent of flooding within those areas. Again, this particular output has also been validated by STMA and then the Ministry of Works and Housing and the Ghana Hydrological Authority. After that, we did the flood risk modeling. So the flood risk modeling, as we can see on my right top corner, it is giving you an estimated damage in terms of housing that can be affected by flood, and then the cost range in USD. And you can see from the top orange, which is from 1 to 100, from 1 year to 100,000 million USD, and then up to greater than 5 million USD. greater than 500,000 USD. Then we come to the road, because we also, as we said, we are looking at road intervention again in the STMA. And then the road intervention is also basically to look at how we improve the road resilience, and then also improve mobility, because currently as you go to Takoradi, you realize that most of the intersections and then junctions are not improved enough to facilitate mobility, including even walkways for pedestrians, which impede vehicle flow. So if you, with this assessment, we look at the roads that are to be done, that will be affected by flood, if there is any flood hazard within Sekondi-Takoradi. And then the cost in terms of USD is also given. And then as you can see on my right hand corner. So this was also, we did this simulation for flood. If you look at my left corner, you will see the flood extent for the return period. So we look at the return period 1 year to 100 years. And for this way, so the costing that we did based on the potential hazards to be caused by this were also done with regards to the return periods of hazards we expect within Sekondi-Takoradi. Again, this report has also been validated by all the key stakeholders as I mentioned earlier. Then the next one was to look at the investment options, which I would also say called interventions, the priority interventions that have been identified, which is looking at both the roads and then the flood. So with this image, as you can see on my right, what you see in orange is the roads. The top priority roads that we are, our study has revealed needs to be rehabilitated because need to be improved for mobility and then also for flood resilience. And then the red dots are the hotspots around those roads that we are looking at. And these hotspots are flood related. So what that means is that it is showing you the sections along the road where there could be potential flooding that could impact the performance of the road during floods or during heavy rainfalls. And then as you can also see, we have actually clustered the interventions into 6. So basically what this means is that we are going to consider all these 6 clusters and then look at all the road intervention and flood related intervention. And within these clusters, as you can see on you can see some of the hotspots directly on the road. So these are crossings. These are where we have culverts and then all those that are, that facilitate runoff across our roads. So as you can see here, in each of these classes, the interventions we have gamut of interventions that have been proposed, which cut across all the 6 classes that you have. They include road rehabilitation works and corridor greening. So in as much as we do rehabilitations and we look at the intersections and then looking at junctions as well, we also want to look at how we, as much as possible, provide some greens alongside our roads by tree planting and others to improve the usage of the roads in STMA. We're also looking at the specific culverts or the crossings on the roads that needs to be worked on. And then some of them will be rehabilitated, some of them needs to be replaced. And then we are looking at those ones. Some of the interventions also include wetland restoration, just as we are discussing today, around the Bakadu areas, and all those have also been factored into some of these interventions, and where some of these wetlands also cut across, not only the Bakadu one, we have a couple of them across that are also going to be intervened in. And then we're also going to look at drain constructions in some of the areas, especially for the secondary and then especially the secondary drains, which will facilitate, the flood relief into the primary drains that are within the catchment that we are looking at. And then finally, we're also going to work with STMA to look at localized drainage plans, which would, because we also notice that some of the problems in some of the areas is not because culverts and other drainage structures are not functioning, but it's because of poor maintenance. So we need, apart from the hard interventions and apart from the gray and then nature-based solutions we are going to propose, we also need some soft interventions, which will look at plans to target how these investment will be routinely managed to enhance the performance and sustain the services. So this is actually the intervention package that FCDO's program, which is the Green Cities and Infrastructure Program, Energy and Infrastructure Program, is going to put together and work with Ghana government to attract funding from potential donors, which we are already in talks with, that is EU and then EIB. So currently, this is the status of the STMA road and then flood, the road and flood resilience feasibility study that we are doing. What are the next steps? So the next steps, we anticipate that by July 2025, we would have had all the designs done. Again, we already have institutional and policy assessment, which is ongoing, which would have also completed by July. Financial and institutional assessment, which is also ongoing, which would have been completed by July. Then by September, we would have delivered the complete feasibility study, which the ministry, which will work with government to work with EU and then EIB to attract the funding that will do the key interventions that have been identified. On the second part of our program, I started by saying that the Green Cities and Infrastructure Program is to help Ghana government to make informed decisions when it comes to climate resilient planning, because that is the first step before we can even decide what to do with our investment. So as part of that, we are helping the city, not only STMA, we are also working with 23 other municipal and metropolitan assembly to come up with climate dashboards. And then this climate dashboards is helping the MMDAs to be able to project hazards that are likely to happen befall them in 5-year projections. Most of the tools you find for climate hazard will give you projections in 100 years, 50 years. But the truth is that in 115 years time, maybe you and I will not even be there. And then we are planning for those. And then how effective can we be in those planning? So the short term, which falls in line with MMDA medium term planning, becomes more effective. So with that, every investment is targeting hazards that are likely to happen within the short range. And then the interesting thing about this tool is the specificity with the tool. It helps us to know what type of hazard. Is it flood? Is it drought? Is it heat wave? Where is it going to happen, and what is the intensity? And these are also these are characteristics of the tools you will find missing in most dashboards that you'll find in Ghana. And to be honest, we are going to be the pioneers in these short-term durations with MMDAs, which will help them to be able to plan effectively with their climate resilience. So the dashboard is in progress. We have had preliminary reviews with STMA, and then STMA is quite excited about it. And then we are hopeful by the end of this month, the dashboard would have been completed, so that in July, there would have been capacity building trainings with STMA, and then we would have handed over the tool to them for them to use for their planning purposes over the period. Thank you. Over to you, Shea.
Thank you very much, Shelto. Very interesting presentation. And yeah, I think we're all very happy to see that the project work doesn't stop at the study that we're launching today, but it continues and will hopefully continue all the way until we can come to Takoradi and see the nature-based solutions firsthand and the reduced flooding. So I know we're already at time, but I think Natalia and Shelto can stay a few extra minutes. So if there's any questions on the presentations that anyone wants to ask, you can feel free to raise your hand. You can also write in the chat. I know there was already one question asked and answered in the chat, so I'll leave it there. Anyone else can write in the chat their questions. You can also raise your hand and speak out loud. If you want to, also those who are joining from other cities, if you want to share a bit about any of your work on nature-based solutions in your own cities, that would also be very interesting, I think, for some others in the chat to hear about. If you think there's opportunities for exchange, please be writing that in as well.